Constructing your life is about much more than just building a bank account. Each week, join real estate entrepreneur and mindset coach Austin Linney as he interviews guests who are constructing their dream lives and impacting the world around them on a daily basis. If you're an entrepreneur or wanting to start a business, or you just want to hear motivating stories of how others have overcome the odds, you are in the right place. And now for your host, Austin Linney.
All right, guys, welcome to Construct Your Life. Guys, I'm so excited. Two of my favorite people in the real estate space, to be honest with you, are here. We're live on Facebook, so check us out over there. And before we get started and I introduce y'all, I want to thank dreamchasers.com, Adam Carswell, for sponsoring the podcast. Thank you so much. Truly appreciate that. So Daisy and Luca at Make It Rain Capital. What I want to do with y'all is introduce yourself to the guests, the listeners, and everybody that's listening, and kind of tell your stories a little bit, and then we'll get into where we're going.
Cool. So my name is Luc DeBro, married to my wife Daisy here. We recently moved to Austin, and the reason that we moved is because we have invested in real estate in the past passively. And we know that in order to move things forward, that we need to get on the active side, be boots on the ground, and be able to make progress doing that. So right now, actively looking at JV and syndicating multifamily deals here in the Austin area, San Antonio area, Central Texas, and then also Southern Texas now at this point. So yeah, that's the big focus right now. I know it's like a pretty high level overview, but that's just a little bit about me. I know we'll end up digging into a bunch of stuff, so I want to allow enough like space for you to do your thing, Austin.
No, for sure. And then Daisy, what's your background?
Yeah, my background is in education. I've been in the international education space the last 10 years, working with international clients from all over the world. And so now recently, actually, as of a month ago, transitioned out of my W-2 and now doing full-time the multifamily syndication end. So just using all of that skill set, right? Everything that I've learned, everything that I've gained, and now really powering and putting all of that into the multifamily space. So excited to be in Texas, our new home, and excited to continue exploring and meeting people out here. So Austin, you were actually one of the first people that we met when we came out in October of last year, just to visit. And yeah, I think you saw us on Instagram and you saw we were here, and within a couple hours, we had a date, and we ended up meeting up for breakfast before we ended up heading back home to LA. So full circle for sure.
I have no idea what you're talking about. That doesn't sound like me at all. But what's interesting is I want to stick there for a minute while we unpack a bunch of stuff. It's not easy to invest where you don't live, which you did that already. But then you decided to move where you lived, and so I know that's not an easy decision for y'all. Y'all spend a lot of time pulling that apart. Dallas, Houston, Austin, maybe other states. I guess kind of the genesis to the decision, you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but I want the second part of the question to be how different it is to be active and passive, which I think was a very important point in that conversation.
Yeah, it's been definitely, night and day, right? As a limited partner, as a passive investor, you vet the sponsor, you vet the deal, you vet the area. And after that, it's pretty smooth sailing, right? You're getting quarterly financials, ideally, right, from the syndication group that you're working with. But it's pretty passive, right? As the term states exactly. You're, as long as the distributions are coming in and, everything looks like it's going according to business plan and business strategy, then you're pretty set. Whereas on the sponsor side, it's the complete opposite. It is a job in itself, right? It is, depending on what you're doing, there's different roles. You can be the one to find the deal, be boots on the ground, which is what we're doing now. You can, raise capital. You can be on the asset management side. But regardless of what you do, it is a very active space that you're in. And so with that, comes a lot of businesses, processes and procedures and a lot of the back end things. And so with that, there's a very heavy responsibility, I would say, for sure, for us on our end with the investors that we work with and, the partners that we're working with to really understand the market at a very deep level, to be able to manage their capital and to perform right according to the business strategy.
No, for sure. And it's so true because there's many different factors there. One, cost of living in California opposed to here, / just being able to be near your asset if something were to take shape. But you, Luca, you're still in your current job, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So actually ended up switching roles from a previous company to a new company out here in Austin. And then that was the reason why we ended up deciding to end up being here in Austin.
No, for sure. And so is it when you're a couple and you're investing in real estate, is it nice to have somebody available 24/7, which we know real estate is 24/7, Luca, you're making them, but I'm sure this is a nice, I know it's only been a couple of weeks, but I'm sure this is extremely nice, being able to be available, right? Because real estate is such a 24/7 job sometimes.
It is, yeah, especially when you're working with brokers, right? I mean, they are usually, doing that 9 to 5, right? 8 to 5 schedule. And so just being available to get out to the market. For example, last week, a week and a half ago, I was out touring, a few properties in the San Antonio area. Now we're about an hour and a half out from that area. So, in one day, I was able to look at 4 different properties throughout San Antonio and San Marcos as well. So, I mean, that is not available, right? It's not possible if, I was still working my W-2 job because a lot of it would be done on the weekend or in the evenings, right? And so now having that just the time, right, to be able to dedicate, it's definitely going to help us get to where we want to be faster, because we could have still done it, right, doing a W-2 job, but this is going to help us get there a lot quicker than we would have otherwise.
Mm-hmm. And so let's talk about those the first deal. Somebody I'm trying to frame this conversation to somebody has a job. Maybe they don't have the time to be an active investor per se. Maybe they're making good money. Let's talk about how you thought real estate, your first, couple of big apartment deals, passively invested them. How did that come about? And then what do people need to be thinking about if they're investing in passively? Because not everybody needs to be an active investor.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. I think at least speaking for myself, it kind of came about. As soon as I started working when I was 22, I never ended up doing any of the retirement accounts. I mean, the big reason, Austin, was I just didn't understand them. I just didn't really know what was going on, and I didn't want to start going down this path. For better, for worse, I was a little, I don't know, mistrusting, if you will. And so that's
very.
Yeah, maybe not a little, very. So it wasn't a good fit for me. And so I was always looking for something. I knew that there had to be something that was a better fit that would end up working out, right? And I didn't quite know what that was, but I didn't know what was right, but I knew what was wrong is the way to put it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I guess for me, my journey was reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad right after I finished grad school, and then realizing that real estate was there, dabbled and kind of looked around at a few ways to enter, and then had the opportunity to end up going in on these passive deals a little over 3 years ago now. And so ended up doing that because, I'd been ready for some time, and I'd already thought through the process. I'd been saving up money. It was something that I knew was going to move me forward to where I wanted to be. And so to me, it made sense to end up putting the money in passively and knowing that, okay, well, the big thing for me is like hard asset, right? I mean, there's a lot of reasons that we love real estate, but a big thing is hard asset. It's not something that is really volatile and trades pretty quickly the way that stocks do and the public markets do. And so yeah, that was something that was really big for me for sure. And not having the time at that point in time, didn't have the time, the skills, the energy, the knowledge to be able to really go in and do it actively. And so for me, it was like passively was the right way to end up starting out for sure.
I'm going to do something I never do on my podcast because I think you're the right guy to explain it. So a lot of people have high level conversations about multifamily and they say, well, you're a passive investor. You put some money in and that's what works. But nobody actually talks about the inner workings of it. So you don't have to talk about your deal. You don't have to use it as context, whatever you want to do. You're the passive investor. You put in $50,000 in a deal. Mm-hmm. What does that look like? Did they sell the asset? Did you get the 50 grand back? Did you get quarterly distributed? Like talk us through so people can understand what that even looks like.
Yeah, I think in a perfect world, the business plan goes according to plan, or they beat the business plan, right? The business strategy.
Mhm.
Of course, that it's you're never going to be exactly right on the T with the zeros and the ones and all that. But so far those deals haven't gone full cycle yet.
Mhm.
We're both invested in them together here as a couple. They haven't gone full cycle, like I mentioned. They're about 2 years away from going full cycle if they complete the business plan. But overall, it's been pretty smooth sailing. When I say it's smooth sailing, it's that we put in the money
Mhm.
right on time, a quarter or two later, once the asset is stabilized, then we start getting our checks. We're getting our 2% per quarter. So it's 8% per year. We get our K1s when we're supposed to. Actually, we just got K1s. What was it, yesterday?
Yesterday.
Yeah.
What is the K1?
What it is, it's a tax document that allows you to end up writing down income with these passive losses. So it shows these passive losses of your real estate income and allows you to write down other passive income that is real estate related.
Okay.
So it's a way, it's basically less taxes. That's the long and short of it. But yeah, I mean, overall, it's been smooth sailing. I know that, I mean, COVID had an effect for a quarter, right?
Mhm.
But they paused distributions for that time. But overall, they've been I'd say, pretty communicative. The sponsors, I mean, they're Wildhorn Capital. They're here in Austin and in LA. Andrew Campbell, Reed Goosens. And yeah, we invested in their first two deals, several years ago now.
And it's interesting, right? Like, do I know? Here's what's interesting. Do I know how Wildhorn Capital performs? No, I have no idea. I've never invested in a multifamily deal, nor have invested in a multifamily deal with them. But what I have had the pleasure of doing is meeting Reed Goosens. And I met him at Best Conference ever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And let me tell you something. That man is one of the most pleasurable human beings to ever meet with. I met with him and his father.
Wow.
And that says it all right there. And so people don't understand. Look, yes, they need to perform 100%, but knowing that that's who you're investing with, it makes me feel easier. And that's what I try to harp on people, like likability and doing what you say you're going to do in relationships is what matters in business and what matters in real estate.
For sure. It's a business of people, right? I think like so many others, but within the multifamily space, it's a very small circle. So, if there's a sponsor that, does something that's not right, or doesn't do right by their investors, it's going to get around pretty quickly. So, even with you, right, without saying who we were investing with up front at the beginning, and then, we mentioned Wildhorn, you've met him, there's that relationship there. So it's really about, being true to who you are and keeping your word, right? Because that is going to affect you on a personal and on a professional level, going forward. And people talk, and it's a good thing, right? Because as an investor, I want to be able to ask somebody else, what do you think of this group or that group, and get honest feedback. So for better and for worse, depending on where you fall on the scale, it is something that's going to come up, right? The conversation will come up as long as you're doing your due diligence and really learning about the sponsor group that you're working with. And it's definitely a good thing, right? To be able to learn who they are as people, separate from what the performance is of the asset.
For sure. I mean, and the other part of it too, it's, we're all in this to end up making an impact, and also not only in our own lives, but in other people's lives, right? There is a monetary aspect to it, right? But then the other part of it, like you said, Austin, I mean, it is business. You need to do right by people. That gets harped on a lot. I feel like it becomes trite after a while, but it really is true. I mean, people are putting in their money. Like,
it is.
You can't screw it up, And if there is something that's going wrong, it's like you need to make sure to fix it. Be very communicative with them. Make sure that you're doing right by them, because it's their hard-earned money. Like you can't. Like it's a big responsibility, and I know that there's a lot within syndication where it's, oh, you go in, you start, you may, blah, 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 it's all so great, but it's like, well, it's a responsibility. It doesn't just happen overnight, number one. And you need to take it for the weight that it's worth.
The best piece of advice I ever heard in my life about Airbnb, I'll frame this as the best piece of advice, period, just for life in general, business and relationships. Point out your negatives, don't hide them. And what he means by the one thing that people cannot stand is to be surprised.
Mm.
People are very okay to accept something as long as you properly communicated that that's going on. But by not communicating, it ain't gonna fly. And then people create stories, and then their mind wanders, and you got to get out ahead of it. And so that's in business, that's in life, that's in communication. And so there are traits to different reasons. Like here's a perfect example. And I'm not saying this to blow smoke up both of your butts, but if you came to me and you said, Austin, we need 50,000, we're closing on this deal, you know that I would hand you the 50,000 and I wouldn't even look at the deal. Like, that's the truth. That's how I feel, because I know who you are. I know what you stand for. And here's where that really resonated with me. Before COVID, I had 3 houses I was going to build that were like 3,000 square feet. It was the dream of mine to build these. This is like everything I wanted. Well, I needed 60 grand to get it started. And so I spent like 3 weeks putting this whole fucking shit together, this fucking deck and everything, to get 60 grand from my buddy. And I slid it over to him, and he slid it right back to me. And he was like, I'm good. He's like, I'm betting on you. Here's the 60 grand. Now, we didn't do that deal, but it made me think. It was like I had finally got to a point where people said, that guy's going to go do what he says he's going to do. And so I would hope that through your actions and your daily actions, that you would have the same credibility in the space.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like you're talking about, you know, when you end up building up that credibility after a certain point, then you have that trust and it's a relationship there, and it goes beyond. You are doing business, of course, but it starts to go beyond that, where you, I mean, you have to care about who you're working with, you know. It's because you, like we've talked about before, you're literally taking on other people's money. It's not like, this is not a small thing. And I'm not trying to turn it into a bigger thing than it is, but it is a big thing.
It is a big thing though, right? Because I think if you don't see it as a big responsibility, then I would think twice about investing with you, right? If you think of it as, you know, this is maybe somebody's really hard-earned money, right? They've never saved this much money, or, you know, they're betting. It's literally their retirement. It's literally their life, right? And going back to, we had a winter storm that hit us a little crazy, right, in Texas not too long ago. And, you know, I just imagine somebody in that situation, right, where there's no water, there's no electricity, there's no power. And then your money is investing because you are planning for a certain future. And there's a storm that comes literally into your life, whether it's, you know, an actual storm like it happened here in Texas, or a storm in, you know, your finances where somebody loses all of your money. It's going back to the basics. It's, what are you going to do now? What are those options going forward in the future, right? And so for us, we really take it that seriously, because it is that seriously.
Well, I met with this guy today. He's going to come on the podcast. Like, I introduced to him. His name is Rocky Levante or something. I don't know. He is like the coolest dude ever. He works with the Profit First guy, Mike Mikowski. He's a Profit First coach or whatever. And he said the interesting, he's been in the game a while. He said the interesting thing about real estate is because people make 60, 100K on a flip. He goes, they've treated $10,000 and $5,000 like it doesn't matter anymore. When every dollar matters. Like, every dollar matters. And if you're an investor, my dollars matter where they're going. And so my plan is for me to make enough money in my businesses for me at 45. So that's 7 years away, is for me to turn around and invest my money with operators like y'all, and whether I'm doing my own fund or whatever it is, so I can remove myself from the day to day.
Exactly.
And that's why I'm cultivating these relationships over 6, 7, 10 years. And I don't want to be invested with people that are just going to buy deals to buy deals so they can say they have a unit count.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, there's two kind of main things there's different things that motivate us individually, but really at the end of the day, I mean, for us in Make It Rain, we're working to increase access and education for millennials around multifamily real estate investing. Like, that's it. So like, we'll end up having calls with people, right? Some are very much so starting out. And then it's a matter of telling them, hey, it's like, well, there's this option, there's that option, there's that option. If they never invest with us, I mean, to us, that's fine, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to make sure that people know what these options are available, and then they can have some agency and like take control rather than being at effect and just like, oh, let me just put in the little drip each month into this account or that account, and not really know what their money's doing for them.
100%. It's what me and the brothers talked about, the Buena brothers. Like, we're not, like, don't get me wrong. I want all the houses in Costa Rica, and I want to be successful. But part of being successful for me is about giving back, right? And about teaching financial literacy within kids. Like, I just had Nate Smith and Bethany Smith on the podcast earlier today. And they wrote a book about financial freedom. And I told them, I said, I'm going to buy a book for every one of the people in my mastermind, the charity mastermind that we do, because money's not talked about. And these are people that have had drug addiction or came from poverty-stricken things, and they just don't know. And so how do you make it like, one of the traits that people talk about me about, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but it's something I really cultivate and work on. It's not a joke. Like, I work on this, is taking a very, very complicated concept and breaking it down to a consumable product. Like, like, all the speakers, they speak so broad, like, and it's like, that's great, but like, what are we really doing here? And the thing is, what scares me, and this is what somebody said about me the other day. They said, okay, the other day we saw you on Clubhouse talking about restaurants, and then you were in Clubhouse talking about private money, and then you were in Clubhouse doing Airbnb, and then you were in Clubhouse talking about marketing. They go, you were in 4 different rooms, and he goes, you sounded like you had been doing each one for 30 years. And I was like, well, I'm just, when I'm consumed with something, I go down in it, and I may not but guess what? I don't consume spreadsheets. I don't consume spreadsheets. It's not my thing. And so I've aligned myself. That's why I think these, like, I've seen y'all's personality a little bit. That's why I think the couple dynamic of leaning on each other. And that's something I want to talk about with y'all, like, being in business together sometimes is not always the easiest thing, but I feel like y'all have really cultivated strengths and weaknesses to highlight the partnership, correct?
Yeah, we have. I mean, I think it's definitely working together has given us a very different understanding of each other, right? Being in a relationship is different from working together. And so I'm not going to lie, it hasn't always been rosy, right? At the beginning, when we started last year working on the podcast together, at some point we had to take a step back and say, personally, I did, and say, do we want to work together? Because our relationship matters more to me than, a podcast together, right? And so it was really honing down on that communication, right? And doing it from day one when, there were things that, we worked very differently. Our styles are very different. Our pace is very different. Our personality is very different, right? We're together and we're attracted to each other for a reason, because we're very different. And so then how can we work together and highlight each of those skill sets for each other instead of seeing them as, clashing? And that's something that I would say we've worked on and continue working on for sure. We're in a, in a very good place, right? To where we know each other professionally and personally very well, but somebody can go 20, 30, 40, 50 years being in a relationship and never knowing the other person professionally. So it's very, very different.
Yeah, it is. It's And I think I was more comfortable starting the podcast. Well, I don't think I was. I was more comfortable starting the podcast early on than Daisy was, but that's also because I had a different experience up to that point in my life to where I was like, okay, I'm ready to do this podcast. I mean, why not? And so Daisy didn't have those same experiences. And so we ended up talking about that and figuring it out. And then I also realized, like, okay, well, I can't push hard, because that's just going to push her out of it. Right. Like, I need to take a step back, like, let her, go where she wants to go, like, move how she wants to move. Like, it's not just,
welcome to right now. I'm like, my girlfriend is, younger than me and grew up on an island, and I've lived a life, and I'm thinking to myself, like, some of the shit that's so easy for me because I've lived my life and done all this dumb shit and traveled the world and traveled around. Like, she's going out of the country for the first time on Thursday. Right. And so it's making me realize that sometimes, as men, especially, you would never be this way, Luca, but we're uber aggressive sometimes when we want something, and that pushing doesn't really get the job done. does it.
Right. And now it's just, we figured out like what works, right? It's like if Luke needs me to do something, he'll add it to our CRM, and it sends me a notification, but I don't feel like he's telling me, do this, do that, right? And so we were like, all right, how can we make this work? If I need something from Luke, I'll add it to our calendar, and he knows that it's popping up, it's there, it's something that we need to do together, right? So it's just realizing like what those skill sets are, right? And even what those pain points are as well, right? Because those had never come up in our relationship before that. So it's seeing both, recognizing both, and being able to communicate through it. That was the for sure the biggest piece, being able to separate, what I'm feeling from what the situation is, and say, okay, I'm feeling this way. Why am I feeling that way? It's because, there was an experience when I was younger that, where I didn't like being on social media because I've never shared this publicly, but I'll share that I had a stalker when I was really young. And so I wasn't very public on social media. And so for Luke, it was, we need to do this to be able to get our business to where we want to be. But for me, it was, I felt literally like my life was threatened, right, by being public on social media. And that came with having a podcast. And so it's a lot of those personal things, right, that you have to process and go through, because if you don't, years and years later, even if you haven't talked about it in years and it hasn't come up, it will eventually come up. So it's that personal development side that's crucial. That's super, super important, I would say.
Yeah. And I would just end up in saying, sorry to interject, but I would just
you're good. You're good.
I'm proud of Daisy for that, because I know that wasn't easy. I mean, the amount of activity / visibility that she has just outside of her family on social media now is in a completely different place from where it was before. But it's, she was able to, it's like she defeated the dragon, it's like Hercules, killing the dragon. It's like she killed that dragon, and now she's, I don't know, staying up the top of the mountain or whatever happens, at the end of the story.
Well, so now I'm going to go down a rabbit hole because there's so much power in what you just said on so many levels, because ultimately somebody that's not of the growth mindset and is of the fixed mindset tells Luca, you're pushing me, kiss my butt. Like, this is not what I want to do. But somebody in a growth mindset says, okay, hold on. It's not really him that's pushing me. It's something that's holding me back personally. And so I'm going to look at what's necessary to do the inner work needed to realize what it is. And that might be a couple months. It might be 6 months, but you're having to identify that thing. And here's what they don't tell you. And this is where it gets what people don't understand, the big misnomer in getting better and helping yourself. The only reason that all these things that you hide inside, these things that happen in our childhood, these things that are holding you back from being where you want to be, is because you keep them in the closet with the fucking lights off.
Yeah.
And when you keep them in the closet with the lights off, you think that you're doing the good thing by keeping your burden away from people. But what you're doing is that burden back there is controlling every aspect of your life. And so when I meet people and I say, hey, drug addict, homeless, alcoholic, nice to meet you, it doesn't own me anymore. And so by you saying that this is what happened to me, this is why I feel this way, it doesn't own you anymore. You can move past it. And then boom, here we have you. And so it's so powerful.
It's huge. And it's a work in progress, right? I think there's constantly in life, there's things that come up, whether it's personal, whether it's professional, there's always things that come up that if you are listening, right, to your gut, to your intuition, to how you react to external factors, it's telling you something that you need to work on. And so it's just being attuned to those signs, right, to those tall tales, to know, okay, there's, you meet someone and you get, a weird feeling. Well, why is that? There's a reason for that. But if you're not tuned into that, then it's just going to, you're just going to think like, oh, they were a jerk or, something happened. But there's always a reason for every external emotion. There's something internal that's causing it. So it's being in tune with that.
100%. And you can do what I did in my 20s, and you can beat against the world, and you could say it's, it's their problem. But ultimately, at the end of the day, extreme ownership is how you get out of every situation, no matter what that looks like. And so as we go down that route, I'm interested because I know the podcast for y'all was kind of like, I know it was back and forth, but, I did notice that yesterday you had the honor of sitting down with Mr. Abreu and his lovely wife. And, I would imagine the same as it done for me. Mine will have been started like 3 weeks would be a year. Mm-hmm. So I would imagine that the world of podcasting has opened up doors and conversations that you probably never thought you would ever have, correct?
Yeah, for sure. It was, it's I don't know if we would have ended up moving here when we did if it weren't for the podcast, simply because like you said, it opens up a lot of doors, and you have all these conversations and there's relationships that are able to get built that just wouldn't happen otherwise. And then you end up getting connected with people because it's like, well, hey, here's a platform for you to talk about what you want to talk about. And here's a platform for us to be able to ask whatever questions we want of you and what our listeners want to hear too. So it's like, it's a win-win scenario. But yeah, it's like funny because every couple months, we'll end up reflecting back, and it's like, man, like look at what's happened. Like this is crazy. You know what I mean? Yeah. Who would have thought? Like this X, Y, and Z. Like I was in Jamaica, like we were here for our honeymoon in Texas, like all this crazy stuff. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like we're going to Costa Rica. We live in Austin. It's just like it's just. Like when you have a growth mindset, like you alluded to earlier, like you're open to these new possibilities that are able to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting thing, and I've rarely shared this with people, but I almost use the podcast as a marker. Like meaning like if I'm ever having a really bad day, I'll go and listen. Like, if I'm in a bad mindset, I'll listen to the podcast I did with my coach before I have my podcast, and I'm like, dude, you've been through a lot of bullshit, dude. And it's like almost documentation of the journey, right? And like, or you look back on the first Instagram post and you're like, dude, that guy didn't know what he was doing. And like, but like, I'm also in love with like watching this shit get more professional, right? Mm-hmm. And so there is some aspect where if you're walking into this right now, this content creation with the right mindset of this is my new networking funnel. Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, I'm talking to venture capitalist guys in San Francisco because of my podcast about industrial space. Like the other day I had a conversation with a dude in London, a dude in Spain, a dude in Puerto Rico. And I'm like, how could you ever do that in one day? And so, but I think people get into it for the wrong reasons, right? And understanding that where I've had a problem, and this is what I'm working on, don't talk to my assistant, is I'm too excited. So I schedule too many interviews. And so I've managed to do like 350 in like a year, between the two podcasts. And so I'm about to take a little break because I need to get away for some creative and work on my businesses. But understanding you don't need to release a podcast every day. Like you could release one or 4 a month or 3 a month. But it's about just releasing them in general and just creating the conversations and not comparing yourself to somebody else. Because, let's be honest, the downloads, it matters, but it doesn't matter that much. Because if you're affecting 20 to 30 people, that's, a podcast, that's a big net, in my opinion. How do y'all look at it on the downloads and the episodes and all that stuff?
For me, it doesn't really matter. I mean, for me, if it impacts one person, Austin, to be completely honest, that's more than enough. And we know that it has, right? Because people have reached out to us. We've met with listeners, right? We've talked to listeners, and we're constantly learning about what they want to hear, right? But if our mission is to create more access, then the number of downloads is going to be reflective of how many people we're reaching. And so, of course, the more people we reach, the better, right? The more impact we can make. But for me, it's really one person at a time. So if we are, impacting one person a day, one person a week, one person a month, then we're making progress, right? Towards where we want to be and towards creating more access for millennials to invest. And so we definitely look at, the numbers. Actually, Luc does a little bit more. He's more in tune with that. But for me, it's really about creating quality educational, spaces for people to share their expertise, for people to share their story, for others to be able to relate, right? Maybe nobody's ever seen somebody that looks like us in the space. And then they see us and people reach out and they're like, I've never seen another Latina speaking about what you're speaking of. And that's what really fuels me, right? Because now I'm on a mission with, the Wendia brothers as well. We're doing some cool stuff together. To where we want to create more access for Latinos as well to invest and to be part of the conversation.
100%. And just so you're clear, I've adopted myself as a Latino now. So we're good.
You're honorary.
I'm the only guy that is basically the token white kid with all the Latino investors. So it's totally cool. But it's interesting, right? Perfect example. True story. One, young kid I've been kind of helping, who's on Diego Corzo's team now. Jaime is Hispanic, and he's an agent now in Austin, and he's coming on the podcast again to tell his real story this time. And he just started a real estate career. He's a great young kid. But there's a girl who's in our mastermind, the charity one for the recovery, and she said, my new goal for the rest of the year and my top goal is to be on your podcast. I've listened to it, and I said, how about April 6th on 11 o'clock? And she's like, what? And I was like, well, let's just get rid of your goal right now. And I haven't told you how many times I've done that to somebody, because this is two things that happened to me that changed my life forever with the podcast and really removed my thoughts of like who the guest needs to be and all that shit. Jaime said that his grandma texted him from Mexico and said like, oh, mijo, my baby, he's famous. He's a big star, like the Kardashians or something like that. And I was just like he's like, she got to hear me on the podcast, and that was such a big deal to him. And then my buddy Andreas, who works for UT and handles all their money, he said that, listen, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but he says, if something were to happen to me, he goes, my son would have a documentation of my life for him to know who I was. And I was like, shit. Wow. I was like, wow. I didn't here you are just having this interview with somebody or trying to have this conversation and realizing that you as a host, it might be super, important for you to get through it or run through it. But this is why I'm working on a daily basis to be where my feet are and understand that to them, it might be something very important. So that time that you take to explain to somebody how a multifamily asset works. And like you said, this might, what I try to tell everybody about the Airbnb space is understand that to you, this might seem like just another guest, but to this family, do you understand that to come from, India or Africa or Europe, that they've saved up for 4 years to come to America, and you're going to be mad at them because they asked some questions? So my question to you is be grateful that you have the opportunity to host them. Be grateful you have the opportunity to take on investments. Be grateful that you get the opportunity to host people on your podcast, and stop thinking it as some chore that you have to do. And what we've reframed in our mastermind is, I get to. Okay, I get to be here. I get to have this conversation with you. I've been on Zoom since 6 a.m. this morning. Doesn't matter because I'm here to show up for you. I'm here to show up for whoever's going to listen to that. Same reason why y'all have had a long day too. And I think if we all took that mentality, I think that the world would be a better place for sure.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, right? I've been able to travel to where Daisy's family's from. So they're from a rural part in Mexico. My in-laws, my parents-in-law and our parent-in-laws, I don't know what the plural is, but, being able to see
your
that.
Suegros.
Yeah, my suegros. You already know that word, Austin.
Yes.
Being able to travel there and then, seeing, I remember the first time I went there and I was thinking about how much money I'd made that year. And then it would be like a godsend if any of them made that much, let alone a fraction of that. You know what I mean? And that's not, and it's not like, oh, oh, I'm so great and they're so bad, or, oh, I really need to be thankful for what I have because so many other people have so little. It's not necessarily that. It's just like, look, like, have perspective on your situation, like you're talking about, right? I mean, nothing's promised, right? Something could happen tomorrow to each of the three of us. Hopefully it doesn't, right? But those things, like those things can happen. And that's what happens with life sometimes. And so it's like, you have to, I mean, I've been working on that over the past few years, just like really being present as much as possible in a situation, right? And then the people who are very important in my life, making sure to end up engaging with them, having conversations, like talking to them, talking to my parents, talking to my brother on a super consistent basis, because, you know, at the end of the, like when all the bullshit falls away and all, you know, like when all this stuff goes away, it's like,
who matters?
Like, who matters? Like, what do you really have? Who are you? Like, what's really important in your life? Like that stuff ends up being very, very powerful at the end of the day, you know, when you're able to strip away all of the superfluous stuff that really doesn't end up mattering. And then the other part I would say too, as I've talked about this on other podcasts, but I think about like my grandparents or like my great grandparents and like the positions that they were in. None of them were here in this country at that point, right? Somewhere in Europe, somewhere in the Caribbean, right? But if they saw the way that I live and like the things that I have, like we're freaking talking, like, you know, you're like however many miles away, we're like talking like this right now. This would be like, it would be a godsend. They would think they were just like, you know,
crazy,
like kings, like royalty to be able to do this type of stuff, you know? So I work to just have perspective on that on a daily basis as much as possible.
And I think something that I've had to train myself in, and that's what I'm about to get out of the fray in about 3 weeks, because I did this to myself and I'm totally cool with it. But ultimately, I think that you also have the reason that we might start lacking perspective is that we filled our calendar up with too much stuff. And when you're not doing, this is something I've asked 6 people today. And when I ask them, nobody has an answer for me right away. And it almost drops them like, oh shit, that was a hard one. It's not even that hard of a question, but it's really, you know, so many people in life chase their passion and their purpose, right? But let me ask you a simple question. What do you do that gives you energy?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I can tell you now. Talk to people.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's the connection. It's, you know, whether it's with you, Austin, whether it's, you know, I'm sitting, you know, in a train station in the middle of nowhere and I pick up a conversation with a random stranger and maybe we don't even have the same language in common, but we make it work. Or, you know, they share a meal with me and, you know, we make it work. It's for me, it's the connection with people. It's the reason that I travel. It's the reason that, you know, I have such strong relationships in my life. It's because of the connection. For me, everything comes down to relationships. Even within, you know, what we do professionally, it's relationships, right? With you, we got to know you, you know, with other people that we've met in the space, it's understanding who they are as people. And yes, the professional aspect will come into place and maybe you'll partner, maybe you won't. But for me, it's about who you are as a person and understanding that. And that fuels me. So for me, I'm in a very similar place to you that, you know, if I can talk to people all day and it energizes me, I can be in a, you know, maybe in a sad place, right? Because I'm away from my family. And this has been the case for me this week, right? Where I've had a hard time being away from my family. And then I, you know, jump on a call with you, I jump on a call with, you know, one of our listeners, or, you know, I interact with somebody and that lifts my spirits like that. So for me, it's hands down, no question, connection.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it would be having conversations with people I am very close to on a one-on-one basis to where I feel like I'm making progress. Like making progress in life gives me energy, and having those conversations with people like, you know, the people who are at my wedding, right? Like that's like that for me, that's my circle. And like we had a wedding of 25 people. So I'm talking like it was a tight circle, man.
Yeah.
What about you, Austin? I'd love to hear, I know you're on the interviewing side, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that same question.
You know, I was talking to somebody today. I think that my financial pursuit is to create a life for the last, I would say probably 20, 30 years of my life, the way I have it visioned out. Is that I literally get to give all my time away. And when I mean all my time, all my time. And I've got a guy right now who is a friend of mine who I've been helping, and he thinks that I should go talk to like colleges and high schools. He thinks that I come at stuff from a different angle. And so I basically live by a mantra as simple as this. We're about to launch a company with some people, and we're all very excited, and it's going to change the way the business is done in the construction space. But it's one of those things where I chased the dollar, didn't get it, got beat up a bunch, lost a lot of money. And so I merely want to do business with cool ass people in cool ass places and do cool ass projects. That's it. But here's the rub. Here's the rub, because I'll finish that off. To understand that that is the direction you're taking takes a ton of self-will and self-discipline, because I must turn down 5 management Airbnb properties a week because they don't fit where we want to move forward. And here's the other rub. What we want to do and what we're doing takes 2, 3, 4 years with not a lot of money. And so you have to have the long-term vision. And don't get me wrong. Do you know how hard it is to coach coaching clients and they're making $60K a shot off some of these wholesales? And you're just like frustrated as shit. But like, ultimately, I have to believe, and this is what I wish for everybody, you have to believe there's something bigger for you out there. And so I'm going to hang on to that and cling to that and understand that my impact, what we call in my business, or for me, what I focus on is an impact ripple. I want to create an impact ripple of, I want to walk down the street and I want somebody to listen to this conversation, and I want them to stop me on the fucking street 20 years from now and go, dude, you fucking helped me.
Yeah.
And you know what's crazy?
It gives me the chills.
Well, you know what's crazy about the universe? The moment that your will or your drive is starting to fade, you get one of those messages. And it's like, it picks you up for a whole nother month. It's like, dude, because here's what we do with people that do this on the regular basis. And I'm thinking about this the whole time I'm doing this interview, because I'm thinking about who I was a year ago. It comes so natural to me that when we're A players or you're high level performers, we do things that other people would seem hard. I do them so easily. I network so easily that I discount them. But I don't know. And so that's why I'm very careful on who I show up as when I show up somewhere, because me showing up as the best version of myself might engage somebody to be the best version of herself. So what people don't actually know about me is I'm actually a pretty damn quiet guy. Like, I know that sounds like crazy, but I'm not always up. I'm not, to be honest with you, it's like, I'm like but I know when I need the energy. I know, because here's what I try to tell all the people I help today. You know how you really change in life? Energy. It's energy. You're coaching everything, because I'm going to tell you how I coach people and how I talk to people. So I had this innate ability to see somebody in the best version of themselves. And so when I meet you and let's say we're coaching, I'm coaching you as if all the changes that you want and you told me already happened. And so because I speak that into existence and I talk you at that frame, I pull you along to be that version of yourself that eventually you just walk right into it.
Yeah.
And so
I'm going to challenge you a little bit, though. I don't personally, my belief is that it's not innate. It's that your lived experiences, though, Austin, is what makes it, right?
Yes.
Because nothing is innate. You can be a jerk, right? And hate the world and, have nothing going for you. And then your mindset changes and you decide to be a different person. And then, within a year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever that may be, you can be something completely different, right? I see mindset and habit, in the back, right? Yeah. And it's all about that, right? It's like you had these lived experiences and you tapped into that potential.
Yes.
But it was your experiences that made you that way.
1000%. And you'll love this. So I don't have to be, so my coach said me this. You don't have to be stressful as a coach, because all you're doing is coaching what you lived through.
Exactly.
And so the people that have the innate abilities that are the troubles that you've had, you've already lived it. So you're just sharing the experience of them. So what we call it in my business is just clearing off the windshield. There's too much bugs. There's too much bullshit. Everything that you have is inside of you, just like you said, Daisy. And it was for me to get out of my own way, for me to tap in and believe in myself enough. And it's the same thing that you're doing as you're stepping into the active world. It's the same thing that people are doing to change their life. And so these are the aspects. And I want to finish it off here because I want to respect your time. And I want to finish off this question. What do y'all do on a day-to-day basis to keep such a cultivated positive mindset? Is it centered in your daily habits? Like, is it something you cultivated over time?
Yeah. So for me, I've been writing my goals down for the past better part of 5 years, I would say. And these are like, some of these goals are goals that are monetary. Some of them are familial. Some of them are more spiritual, right? Some of them have to do with things that I may never accomplish because it's hard to accomplish. Like, how do I accomplish that I have a happy, healthy, and loving spouse? Like, I don't know. Like, that's like something that's constantly being worked on, you know? So there's these goals, and some of them monetarily, they're potentially a couple decades out, right? But that's a big thing for me that I end up writing those down. Meditating has been pretty impactful for me now. Been doing that very consistently for the past year and a half. So I do that in the morning also, along with writing down my goals. And then the other part is the Stoic journal, or I guess it's called the Daily Stoic, Ryan Holiday. So that's huge, right? It's, control what's in your control. It's like the serenity prayer, right? You got to be able to recognize the difference between what's in your control and what's not in your control. And then be able to have the power to not, try to take control over things that aren't, and know that difference. So for me, I would say it's those things. And then keeping a very regular schedule, like, in terms of the work that I do daily or on a weekly basis.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely took after Luke in terms of the goal setting. That was not something that I did before I met him. And so for us both, I would say we each have very different goals and some of them overlap, right? But it's also, writing down my goals in the morning, checking in with my family every day. I know that if I don't do that, I'm very close to my family. So hence why it's been hard for me, right, to be away from them. And I knew that it was going to happen, that it was going to get difficult, right? But it's checking in with them, having that strong foundation, I would say, like internally, to be able to then execute externally. But a big thing for me on more so the practical side, there's two things. One is working out. No matter what's going on around me, that's one thing that I can control, right? Whether it's snowing outside, I have kettlebells inside and I'm going to swing a couple kettlebells and feel completely different. So controlling that, like the physical state on one end, and then on the other end, it's the calendar. For me, I like live and die by my calendar, and I'm like crazy about it. Even date night, everything goes on there. Because if it's not on there, it's not happening, right? And so it's just making sure that my priorities are scheduled in, because what's the point of doing all of these things to one day get to a place to be able to spend time with my family or do certain things, with my husband, if we're not doing them along the way. So it's those reminders, and it's also reminding each other, right? Because it can get, quite overwhelming sometimes with there's always something going on for Make It Rain. There's always, somebody to talk to. But sometimes also reminding each other of, okay, we need date night. Like we've been putting it off, and we need to have that to be able to recharge and take a step back. Sometimes you need to take a step back to take 2 more steps forward or 5 more steps forward.
I couldn't agree more. I love that. And so if people want to find out more about the podcast and y'all, how would they do that?
Yeah, so we're on Instagram. It's at Make It Rain Podcast. We're on our website, Make It Rain Capital. We're on Facebook now. I don't know when this is. Well, I was saying I don't know when this is going live, but I guess it's live right now. But we have a YouTube channel that we're starting here like very soon. Facebook. Both of us are on LinkedIn. We're kind of everywhere. So,
and if you're in Austin, let us know. We'd love to connect. And Austin's in Austin, and we're in Austin, so connect, make it happen.
And I just saw my calendar. Thursday, I'm coming on y'all's podcast. So yeah, it'd be great. And then I'm headed to Costa Rica right after that. So I'll be in a really good mood. So
yeah, that's awesome.
Guys, if you like this episode, make sure you send it out to your friends, and we'll see you next time, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Construct Your Life with Austin Linney. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with a friend. Most importantly, take this opportunity to start constructing your life by taking immediate action on what you learned. For show notes, resources, and more information on one-on-one coaching with Austin, visit constructyourlifepodcast.com.